This is episode number 54 with success coach, adventurer, and Army veteran Glenn Azar. Hello and welcome to the SOTA Process podcast. I'm your host, Tom Evans, and I'm a personal development and fitness fanatic with a passion for discovering the concepts and tools that help us to own our mind, body, and soul, as well as the processes we can implement to make us state of the art. If you're looking to make some positive changes, find your purpose, and have an impact, this is the show for you. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Now let's define our greatness. Will Smith said, "Your life will become better by making other people's lives better." And Jim Carrey said, "The effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is." Hey Sotarians, welcome back to the SOTA Process podcast. Today we have a very special guest on the show, Glenn Azar. Now, Glenn and I first came into contact at the very start of my personal development journey. So Glenn has his own podcast called the Building Better Humans Project podcast, and that was actually one of the first podcasts I ever listened to. And right from the start, I was actually just simply amazed by the knowledge and the wisdom that Glenn had. And his podcast is great. Seriously, with every single episode, it challenges the way you think, and it basically prompts you to take action in becoming a better person and a better you. And I was actually lucky enough to be interviewed on Glenn's podcast in December last year. So if you haven't listened to that already, I highly recommend you do, because it was a great chat. So the link for that one's going to be in the show notes for those of you that haven't listened, amongst other things as well, like all the links to Glenn's websites and social media platforms and that sort of thing. So you can find Glenn down there. But yeah, I think I've learnt so much off Glenn in the last 18 to 24 months. And I believe that he was actually one of the people that really inspired me to start this journey for myself. His podcast, amongst others, really helped me to change the way I think and approach each day. So you really should take some time to head over to his podcast and listen to what he has to say. A lot of his episodes are similar length to mine, so similar to my Triple S episodes. He does a lot between the 5 to 10 minute range, but he also does interviews too. So he takes a no BS approach to everything and just genuinely wants the best for everyone, which is just awesome. So for those that don't know, Glenn spent a little bit of time in the Army when he was younger, I think maybe 17 years or so, and now he runs a very successful adventure business doing everything from the Kokoda Trail to dog sledding in the Yukon, that sort of thing. He also has recently opened a gym called Project 180, but it's a little bit more than a gym, to be honest. It does more than just train people in fitness, but it also helps people with their mental health and mindset training and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's definitely worth checking that out as well, because they post some great content there. But anyway, I think Glenn is probably better at telling you everything he does than what I am. So that's where we started. I'll let Glenn tell you a little bit about himself.
Yeah, well, in brief, Glenn Azar, 47 years old, living in Brisbane these days. Spent 17 years in the Australian Army, initially as an infantry soldier, but specialised in aviation medicine, so helicopter evacuation. And over the years, that kind of led on to me going into the adventure field. So these days, or for the last 10 years, I've been out of the Army. I run an adventure business called Adventure Professionals. I kind of have this view that adventure is the best personal development in the world. And so, as in who you are at the start of an adventure versus who you are at the end are two different people. So that started to lead me down the road of, mindset, personal development, coaching. I did 4 years of study at the Coaching Institute in Melbourne. I run a gym, of course, as well on the side of that. So I feel like that's the final piece of that puzzle.
Yeah.
Fitness, mindset, and adventure for me. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm running an adventure business. I'm running a gym, and I do a lot of coaching, and of course I have my own podcast called the Building Better Humans Project. And that's my passion, building better humans.
Awesome. And so I sort of like to kick it off with the Army side of things. So growing up, was your ambition always to join the army?
Never thought about it at all. My father was in the army, and my grandfather, great grandfathers. I had numerous people in the military from both sides of the family. But look, to be honest, I was a bit of a wayward kid. I had a lot of problems at home. My father was definitely, we're okay now, but he definitely had alcohol problems. He was a big, sort of aggressive and fairly a violent sort of man, I guess. So I moved out of home at 14 and a half. So the last thing I possibly thought about doing was anything. I didn't really think about careers or any of that sort of stuff. And I was a bit wayward for a few years, as you are when you're that age and you've got no one setting you rules. You kind of, you do all the things you probably shouldn't do because you think there's no one able to tell you what to do. And that was really my mindset for a lot of years. And then as a teenager still, I just kind of stumbled across, well, the first Gulf War started and I just felt this pull towards, representing my country, I guess, or doing my bit. I didn't really know what that looked like. I was also quite an aggressive young bloke, so I thought, an opportunity to fight and to do something and be paid for it made sense to me back then. And, from there I joined the army, which in hindsight turned out to be the best thing that ever happened. It was kind of that mentorship that I didn't have growing up, that sort of, not just males, I guess, but male and female leaderships and parenting, etc. And that's, kind of got me to where I am today, I guess. But it definitely wasn't, I hadn't thought about any career as a young bloke. I never thought more than what I was doing the next day, for a lot of years.
Yeah, right. So that was probably, like you just sort of said then, the leadership and the camaraderie and that sort of thing you probably learnt from the army would have been the best part, I'm guessing. But was there some parts of the army that you didn't quite enjoy so much and the parts that weren't sort of as glamorous? Would you mind sort of sharing those bits?
I guess that's an interesting question because I look back now and I've been out just on 10 years and I look back and think, I loved all of it. I loved every piece of it, but I'm sure that's not entirely true. It's just that, we remember all the best bits of things.
Yeah.
Certainly I was challenged in the early days. What I got most out of the army was family or sense of family, and I didn't really feel that growing up. I felt like I belonged. I kind of had an alpha male personality in the army, they liked that sort of personality. They certainly did in my days. But, I didn't like authority. And when you think about the military, when you first join, literally everyone is in charge of you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of negative reinforcement in the early days, a lot of putting you down. And I guess if I look at that in hindsight, that's trying to, and whether it's right or wrong, it was a way of trying to develop resilience in people that they're going to need when they go to war. And it's a way of weeding people out that don't fit into that system. But by the same token, for that first few years, it was reinforcing, experiences and behaviours that I'd had with my father in that relationship where he was always putting you down. And so you kind of felt disempowered. And I remember that in those first few years, if I was to think of any negative. But, I've been on deployments in war-torn countries and non-active war zones, and I've seen people at their best and at their worst. I've been in incredibly uncomfortable situations, both from a safety point of view and just through the physical comfort and discomfort. But I don't look at any of those things now at my age as a bad thing. I look at them all as saying, well, those are all pieces of who I am now. Maybe at the time it was tough, I don't know, but I honestly can't remember that. Right now I just look back at it with a fondness to say that it developed a strength and resilience in me that makes it very difficult for me to give up. That I think I've been through tougher things. I've seen other people go through tougher things. So I'm going to be okay. So I don't know if that really answers that, but I don't remember too much negative, to be truthful.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I can imagine it would have been like you said, had a lot of positives, really sort of taught you a lot about yourself and who you were and that sort of thing. So the next part I'd like to get onto is, so like you said, you moved out of home when you were obviously pretty young, and even for me that's hard to even come to terms with because I found moving out of home at 18 quite difficult. So I guess for you, what would have been like the pros and cons of doing that at that time for you, and sort of what did it teach you and how did it affect you mentally?
Yeah, another good question. It seems like not even a lifetime ago. It seems like 2 or 3 lifetimes ago, like it happened to someone else now because of what I've been through. And I have children. My youngest daughter's 12 now, so I look at my children. I think I couldn't imagine them living out of home at that age, or even in their 20s. I'm happy for my kids to stay at home as long as need. But the truth is that, I didn't, growing up, feel like I was in a protected or a loving environment. So, and I had some good friends and good people around me, and I think living outside of the home felt like the safer, more secure option for me at the time. Even though I look back now and I go, look, my safety wasn't, my old man was a drinker and he was a bit violent. I don't think he was ever going to do anything else to us, but, he wasn't a great person to be around. So I don't feel like I had safety issues to that point. If I look back at the time I made that decision, I was young, I was rebellious. I kind of got my back up at a certain age and thought, I'm not putting up with this. I don't need to put up with this. And my family were living in Melbourne at the time and were moving back to Queensland. And I just went, I'm not going. And I'd already run away a couple of times and been dragged back by the police a couple of times. And I think this time I left, I packed up my stuff and left, and they just agreed. I initially bought for about $300, which was a lot of money back then. I was working as an apprentice chef, and I was earning $110 a week on a 6-day week.
Wow.
But I bought for $300 a 59 model combi van, which for anyone knowing combi vans these days, it'd be worth a fortune. But anyway, I bought that. I had a bed in the back of it, and I lived in the backyard of a good friend of mine, Shiloh Curtis, who's been on my podcast. I lived in her backyard with her parents, and then I upgraded to a caravan eventually, and I used to ride. It's not a hard luck story, but I used to ride a push bike 39 k's from out of Melton into Melbourne every day to go to work.
Right.
mate, I got into trouble. I had good jobs. I worked pretty hard, but then I also couldn't afford to live, so I did things I wasn't proud of. I stole money from places that I worked at out of their cash registers. I got sacked for that one particular time, and I was working for someone I really liked. But I just, you get desperate and you make desperate decisions. And it's one of the things I look back on with some embarrassment to this day because I'm not that sort of person. But, you kind of were in survival mode. I got into nothing bad, but, just a little bit of drugs and just smoking some weed and a bit of speed and just doing the things that a 14, 15, 16-year-old roaming the streets would do, getting into altercations with the police, getting into fights. I often think I could write a book about that, and people would be shocked that was me compared to who I am now and what definitely. I do with my life now. But what it highlights to me is I look at young kids that people give up on, and I go, no, he could make it still, or she could make it still because I did. Like I view that I made it. Coming from those backgrounds to where I am today, I'm very happy. I'm not wealthy, I'm not any of that stuff, but I'm really happy.
Yeah, I think that's definitely more important than money, anyways. Just being fulfilled at the end of the day. So.
Absolutely, and you mentioned how did it affect my mental health?
Yeah.
Well, I guess more than anything, when you get involved in whether it's drugs or stealing money or doing things to survive, whether you admit it or not, you act alpha and you act tough when you walk in the streets with people and you're getting in fights. But the truth is, you slowly devalue yourself. You don't like who you are, even at that age. You don't realise it at the time.
Yeah.
And it was only through joining the military and them having such a strict code of ethics. When I joined, and I don't know about today, but if you got caught stealing, you'll get discharged almost immediately because it erodes trust. If you can't trust someone, you can't put your life in their hands. Therefore, you don't want to go to war with that person. So the military turned all of that around and instilled these really good ethics. And I mean, my parents were hard workers. They weren't people that would steal or do any of that sort of stuff. But if you're not happy in a certain environment, people's actions and words don't fully match up. You don't take on those lessons, necessarily anyway. So, but once I got into the military, they had a strict code of ethics. They followed it. They enforced it, and you either stayed on board with that or you got out. And it really did bring me on to the straight and narrow. Yeah,
right. So, after you finished in the army, whereabouts did you go from there?
So I got out of the army. I was actually down in my last posting was in Oakey, just about 150 k's west of Brisbane. So that's an aviation base. That was my last base. Whilst I was so I joined with the Year 9 education, and I did very, very well in the military. I topped nearly every course they put me on. I performed well. I loved my job. I took it very seriously. I proved to myself that I could do things when I applied myself. I was never an idiot, but I left school in Year 9. I passed the first half of Year 10, but the last full year And the Army ended up putting me through a nursing degree at University of Southern Queensland. So I did that. And that was when I first realised I'm actually not dumb. Like, I can learn. I'm actually quite good at it. And that was a bit of an epiphany for me. Now, I was 30 years old when I went to uni, or 29. And that was the first time I realised I'm not an idiot. And so I did my uni degree. I didn't really like nursing, if I'm really honest. I preferred the paramedical side of what I did. I didn't like working in hospitals, and that wasn't my environment. It's kind of a toxic environment in hospitals. There's a lot of, nursing people don't get on, and then they're dealing with, people at the toughest parts of life, and I don't know, it just wasn't a great, where I wanted to be, positive environment. So what I did do is, while I was at uni, which the Army paid for, but I kind of needed extra living money, and I started training civilians for the first time. And I boxed as an amateur and a little bit as a professional, not well, but I was a good trainer.
Yeah.
So I started training people. I started training corporate clients. That's when I first started to get introduced to mindset and positive thinking. And that's when while I was in the Army, I did my first ever Kokoda track crossing.
Right.
I got asked by a group of guys. They needed an aviation qualified medic to take the executives of Westpac, or to be the support for that. And I did that. And now, in a couple of weeks' time, I'll be heading off on my 80th Kokoda track crossing.
Wow.
I'll probably hit 90 by the end of this year. I'll do at least 9 this year, but maybe 10 or 11.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of got me thinking about, I love this concept of, what's his name, Steve Jobs from Apple. And he said years ago that, we can't always connect the dots going forward in life. We have to connect them going backwards. And the context for him was the fact that he got sacked by Apple, even though he owned a percentage, and he had heaps of money. But he was really angry that he got sacked from the company that he started because they didn't like his direction. He goes away and starts a couple of other companies, or finances them. One of them was Pixar. Long story short, he goes back to Apple years later when they need resurrecting. And he says if he hadn't been sacked, which he was angry about at the time, he wouldn't have been involved in the creatives that were Pixar, and therefore he doesn't think the iPhone would have existed the way it exists today, because a lot of the creativity of Pixar, which wasn't him, came into that product. And well, that kind of happened to me. If I broke my leg very early in my Army career, they forced me out of the infantry and into medical corps. I didn't want to do that. I ended up somewhere down the track becoming a medic, becoming an aviation medic, becoming a nurse, falling into a job on the Kokoda track. Next thing you know, I've got an adventure business. My daughter, as you know, has climbed Mount Everest twice. Well,
Yeah.
that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have broken my leg as a 19-year-old. And all these things, all these dots connect when I look back, that I wouldn't have made those decisions going forward, which I think is really interesting when we take stock of our life. And sometimes when we feel like things aren't going our way, we don't really know. They could actually be going our way. They could be forcing us onto something better. And 100% that's happened in my life. It's not just a story or a cool quote. That's what's actually happened to me. So I'm a believer in that stuff. But yeah, I got out of the Army, started my own gym, started working my own adventure business. And I got that wrong. I knew nothing about business. I got no idea on how to deal with money and the ATO and BAS statements. And, within a couple of years, I'm owing the ATO 70 grand and they're breathing down my throat. And I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm trying to learn. So then I go and find mentors and people have been there and done that. And slowly over time, we run a good business now. We did, a solid 7 figures last year in one of our businesses alone, it was a record year for that business. And, oh man, it's been blood, sweat and tears, and sleepless nights. And I've been through a divorce and I've done everything in between.
Yeah.
But, we're kind of getting to where I always thought we could get. I always thought we were good enough to be. So, and it's been a hectic, and all that's been in 10 years,
Yeah. And so sort of, was it towards the end of your Army career that you started to get into personal development? And then sort of how much has that influenced your life compared to what it was before you started all of that stuff?
So I kind of like this story, and I hate it because it's so cliche, but cliches are cliches because they're true.
Yeah.
I got deployed in 1998. 1999, I got deployed to Timor. I'm not sure what year you were born.
Yeah,
but,
99.
So I got deployed that year to Timor. And the year before, I got deployed to an island called Bougainville in the North Solomons. Now, they'd been fighting with PNG for about 25 years. There was no structure in that country left standing. Everything had been
Wow.
burnt and destroyed. And a lot of Australians don't realise this. So we went in and we had a medical facility. They're the only medical facility on the island. I had a guy row a boat 5 hours with a collapsed lung after he got stabbed in a fight to us because we had doctors and nurses there. And one of my young diggers said, how did he do that? And I said, well, his other option was to lie down and die. Like, when putting those situations, he might not have made it. We never would have heard about it, but he made it.
Yeah.
I had
Wow.
a woman walk 40 Ks and she was 39 weeks pregnant. She'd broken her foot, which is what she really wanted treatment for, but she was also about to give birth. And we ended up doing a cesarean on her in our treatment facility. But she walked 40 Ks for that to happen. Like, that's phenomenal. I had a bloke shot 3 times with an M16 and we gave him Panadol as a post-operation medication because he'd never had pain relief. So it worked at some level for him. So I was having all of these experiences, but what really changed my life, because I grew up very negative, very alpha, very screw the world's out to get you. That was my attitude. And the Army's okay with that because you can be aggressive and you can be channeled. But when I went over there, I bought Nelson Mandela's book, The Long Road to Freedom. He'd just gotten out of jail after 27 years in jail. And I read that and I thought, it was big. And I thought, I'll read this. I'm deployed for 6 or 8 months. I got time. I couldn't put it down. I read it and read it and read it in every spare minute. I was looking for spare minutes. And it amazed me that this guy could do 27 years in jail, and in his first 2 weeks of getting out, he goes and meets with every politician, with every jailer and prison warden that treated him the worst and that held him in there. And he met with them individually at their houses, and he had dinners and lunches with them. And I just thought I couldn't do that because I'm not good at forgiving people. To this day, it's still a weakness of mine, and I have so much anger about that. This guy did it. And when asked why, he said, if I come out and I was still, and I was angry and I used my newfound power to get back at them, I may as well still be in prison because mentally that's where I'd be.
Yeah.
And that was a turning point for me. And that's when I started to fully understand that if you can change the way you think, no matter what's happened to you, you can change your outcomes in life. And you couldn't convince me that's not true anymore. And it sent me on this path, as you know, when you get into personal development, is you can't stop.
Yeah.
You just feel so empowered. I have people that tell me it's all garbage. That's okay. I'm not here to convince them. I just know what works for me. But I've had a lot of people contact me off my own podcast and say something that recently a lady said something that you did or said 2 years ago totally changed my life, and this is what's happened in that 2 years, and I didn't even know her. So, and I get messages every other week these days because I've been doing that podcast. It's in its 5th year, and you get people that go, I listened to this, or there was one thing that you said. Maybe not everything resonates, but one thing does. Well. All of that is just coming from my own personal experiences and from the absolute crazy amount of reading and listening to podcasts and watching videos and courses, and I'm obsessed by it. And in the process, I'm also coaching a lot of people. If we're physical trainers, as in I was a physical training instructor in the Army before I did it civilly, and it was just about getting people fit for war. When I got out, it was just about getting people lose a few kegs and feel a bit better about themselves physically. But now I realise we're underselling ourselves as PTs. It's personal development.
Yeah.
It's one piece of personal development. And people often are coming there really for a lot more mindset than we give credence to.
100%.
And so that just took up my whole life. And it's a path that I'll be on forever. I'll be that crusty old 80-year-old bloke still doing Facebook live feeds, telling kids how they can live better. That's who I am now.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And then on the podcast as well, what prompted you to start that in the first place?
Well, there's a couple of things. I just thought I'd run into a lot of really interesting people, which I do through my job. People you never would have run into. I've taken single and double leg amputees across the Kokoda track that you never would have heard of. These are soldiers who've been in wars, and one or two you might have heard of, but many you wouldn't have. Well, how could I tell? What a great story. You don't have to be famous. How can I tell that story to someone? I started listening to podcasts, and I was only listening to them for a year, just about 6 years ago. And one guy said, this is how easy it is to start a podcast. I thought, So I was working at Nova Radio, and I went to, my best mate was the general manager of Nova in Brisbane, and I said to him, mate, do you know anything about podcasts? And he said, no. I went to one of the producers and said, do you know anything about podcasts? He said, no. He said, but I could edit sound files together for you. And Then I went to my web designer, Dan Borg, and from Cyborg, and said, mate, do you know anything you know about podcasts? No. And he said, but we can work it out. So between the three of them and me, I just started recording some stuff. We worked out how to get a podcast up. 3 years later, or 2.5 years later, my mate Jay, who's the general manager of Brisbane, is now the head of podcasting Australia for Nova Radio.
Wow.
And I said, mate, 2.5 years ago, you knew nothing about this. He said it has exploded, and radio's put all this money into it, and they're starting to own the space, which makes it harder for little independents like you and I. But there's still a market there, and that's how it started. And I thought I'll do 10 or 20 episodes of 10 or 20 good people, interesting people. I thought it'd be a business podcast. But the truth is, I'm more passionate about people, and businesses are made up of people. So I went down that road instead, and I just called it Building Better Humans project because I had a meeting with some guys once at a big company called Corn Ferry, and they were looking to add adventure into their personal development they do for other companies. And they said, why is adventure so useful? I said, because for me, it's about building better humans. It's about making people better by putting them in challenging situations, and they loved it. When I left there, one of my mates, he said, mate, when you said building better humans, the general manager just lit up. And that kind of always stuck with me. And I thought, well, that's what we do, right? We try and build better humans physically, mentally, emotionally. We might not always get it right, but that's our goal. And if you build better humans, you build happier people, you build better footy teams, you build better businessmen, better mums and dads, better brothers and sisters. You can't really go wrong. And that's kind of how it came about.
Awesome. And then with all the Project 180 stuff, which I absolutely love what you're doing with that. I reckon it's awesome. And so for the listeners that don't know, what's the mentality behind Project 180 with the gym and the personal development and all that sort of stuff, and how do you run that side of things?
Right, so just to give people a backward step, I used to have a gym. We sold it in Toowoomba in Queensland. We sold it in 2013, and that helped finance Alyssa's first attempt on Everest,
Right.
because it was an expensive business, and an offer came in at the right time. And again, connecting the dots, going backwards, I didn't really want to sell it. My accountant didn't really want to sell it because it was doing well. Like any business, it did 9 years where it struggled, and then for 3 years it just boomed, and then someone wanted to buy it. Anyway, they offered more than it was worth. I was going through a divorce. Alyssa had an Everest climb coming up, so it almost felt like a forced sale in some ways. It turned out to be the best thing ever because I then moved to Brisbane and so on. I said, I'll never get back into the gym space. I'm all about coaching and I'm all about adventure now, and that's it. And I just felt like there was something missing, and the physical side is missing. And I'm watching all of these gyms and stuff open up, and I love it all. I love F45 and Fit Stop and CrossFit and Good Life. I like little independents. I like, as long as we're getting people to move, I get it. But some of the time, I just used to hate the marketing. I used to hate the build your beach body and build your bikini body and look better naked. And because as I'm a 47-year-old man who can still physically climb mountains across the Kokoda track 9 times a year, but I don't have a six-pack, and I don't suspect I'll have one again in my life, and it doesn't really interest me. Like, I'm really fit for where I'm at now. I feel great, but to have the discipline to have a six-pack and restrict what I eat and all the stuff that comes with that, that's not me. And I thought, we can be doing this better. So we started a gym, and I decided I'm not going to. One, I like to challenge myself. So 2 years before I started, I sat down and spoke with Corey, who is one of my. He's a mate, but he also works for me, and he runs my admin for the adventure. So I'm going to open a gym. And he said, 2 years from the day you said that, you did it. And I said, yeah, I like doing that. I like setting myself a challenge, and when life is comfortable, I seem to challenge myself. That was a start. But the idea was, I didn't want a fitness name. I wanted a name that represented us, and I kind of battled over that. And initially I thought about Project 360, so this well-rounded approach of health, fitness, lifestyle, mindset. But then I thought, well, no, because we have the adventure business, and I wanted to use 360. If you start here and you do 360, you're back where you started, so I didn't want that. And so the idea behind it is Project 180. Project is everyone who walks in our doors has a project to work on. They might be physically fit, but they might struggle mentally with something, or they might be having business hassles. So not everyone who comes into the gym just comes in for gym stuff. Like, that's one piece of their puzzle. I've got 13, 14-year-old kids through to 70-year-olds. I've got, a woman that has lost both breasts to breast cancer and just come back to training. I've had, a couple of girls, good friends of mine, have just had twins back in training. And then you've got really fit people, everyone in between. So project is everyone has something they want to work on, no matter how good life is. There's something we want to work on. There's always something we want to develop or we'd like to do a little bit better. And 180 was just taking you from where you are to where you want to be, from one end of the Kokoda track to the other, from the bottom of Mount Everest to the top, from being physically unfit to being fit, from being mentally struggling to mentally resilient, whatever it is. It was just 180 was to take you from where you are to where you want to be. I thought I'd just build one, and then I thought I might build 5 of these because this one's in Brisbane. I now think I probably will build a few more, not to go down a franchise model, but more because we just want to have a bigger footprint. And Alyssa, my daughter, and I are going to go into an online format, not just for fitness, but for mindset, because I'm away so much of the year with adventures. We want to be able to give people real time, no BS coaching, access to us, because what we teach, we've actually used. I think we've got high performing mindsets. Like Alyssa climbed Mount Everest as a 19-year-old and again as a 21-year-old on her own. No, I wasn't there. She's climbed the highest mountains in Russia and South America and Nepal and Africa, and nearly all of those she did on her own. She crossed the Kokoda track as an 8-year-old. So, and there was her and I on this massive journey together. So I'm not here to sell people theory. I'm here to say to people, this is what we've actually done. And this is how we applied it. Now, it might not work for you, but at least you know it has worked in a really high-performing setup, but also in really basic stuff. So what is it you want to work on? Well, here's a model. And so we're really, really looking hard at how we make that an online format this year that is affordable for people as well, because we can't help everyone, of course. And I'm a dreamer. We wish and hope and dream and throw numbers around. Like, we'd love to help 1 million people feel more self-confident, more self-belief, less anxiety. Can we do it? I don't know, but you've got to start with one, and one is better than none, and that's how we'll grow it out.
Yeah, no, I love that. That sounds like you're on a pretty good path there. Now, talk to me about the importance of adventure to you, because obviously you're a huge advocate for getting outdoors and spending more time in nature and that sort of thing. So for you, why is this so important?
Well, the way I look at things, and it was probably Alyssa who first brought this up to me, but, she says who I was at 15 years old when I made the decision to climb Mount Everest. That person, not just because she was 15, but because she didn't have the experience, that person wasn't good enough to climb Mount Everest. So, the person you are at the start of any journey compared to the person you are at the end are two different people. So who she was at 15 versus who she was as that 19-year-old that stood on the top of Everest, two totally different humans. And I feel that's the same for everyone. I get so many people who go to Kokoda, Everest Base Camp, Mount Kilimanjaro, who are nervous, who, like, I don't know if I'm up for this. I don't know if I'm physically capable of this. And then when they get over there and you see them and you're walking them through it day by day, you're not doing the work for them because you can't. You're just letting them believe in themselves, and you're saying, you're going to be okay. Let's just get through this day, and then let's get through tomorrow. And it's a little microcosm of what actual life is, that we can get through anything. We can achieve almost anything if we've got the work ethic to back up the desire, if we can keep getting up even on the bad days, especially on the bad days. When you go on adventures, say you're in New Guinea, it's bucketing rain for 4 days straight and you're absolutely hammered, you still walk. You don't go, okay, the conditions aren't right today. I don't feel great today. It's too hot, too cold, too wet, too muddy. Oh, my knees sore. Nothing matters. You just have to keep moving. And I just feel like when you come back from those experiences, you might look at everything else in your life that you thought you weren't capable of and go, actually, kind of surprised myself there. I wonder what else I might actually be able to do that I didn't believe I could do. Because you can't unexperience anything. And once you've proven to yourself that you can do one thing, what you believe you can achieve grows. That circle grows. Things you weren't aware of before are now coming into your peripheral. And you go, well, I wonder if I can do that. I just took a lady away, Yvonne, who's a great friend of mine, and we did Everest Base Camp when 2008 maybe. And, she's done Kokoda and stuff, and she's 65, 66. She just came dog sledding in the Yukon. It's minus 33 degrees. It's not a super physical adventure, but it's 8 days of riding your own dog sled team along the Yukon Quest Trail. right up on the Alaskan border. It's pretty full on, and she was as nervous as buggery, and she was even a bit scared out there and a bit emotional and some tears. But you know what? She got up every single day. She got straight back on that dog set every day. If she fell off, she got back on. And we just had breakfast this morning after walking Mount Cootha, and she's again proven to herself what she's capable of doing. And she's, in her later 60s, where people are packing up. People are sitting around in nursing homes and going, well, I'm too old for that now. And I'm living with people that don't live that example. So people go, oh, wow, it's amazing what you do at 47, but I'm being inspired by 66-year-olds who are still doing it. And I go, man, I want to be doing this when I'm your age, and still, and my job is to facilitate that for them.
Yeah.
What people don't realise is, whilst I see them dig deep and grow and become just better versions of themselves, so do I, because I've experienced them doing that, and it keeps me doing what I do. So, the importance of experiential learning, of being out in nature as humans, as we're more and more citified, living in cities, I think it's going to become more and more important to get our feet on the ground, to put ourselves into physical situations that aren't necessarily dangerous, but that are unpredictable. Mother Nature wins always. We've got to react to what she throws at us, and we still get up and go about our business. And we're an animal at the end of the day, and I think we need that to dig into our resilience and to be adaptive to whatever comes to us in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's an awesome answer. So your hashtag as well, hashtag not dead yet, is something you clearly live by, and I reckon it's pretty damn cool. So do you mind explaining to everyone what this means to you?
So a few years ago, I just started, I don't know why, I listened to a podcast. It was probably around marketing or something, to be honest, and they just talked about the importance of having something, a vision statement, a mission statement, and you go into businesses that have all of that stuff, and we all operate with integrity and honesty, and and it's very blah blah blah, and people don't really connect with it. And then I just, for whatever reason, I don't really know where it popped into my head, but I just love this hashtag not dead yet. I put it on a shirt, and people started asking me about it. I started printing it on shirts. Whenever people go on a trip with us, an adventure with us, through Adventure Professionals, they get one of those shirts. Right now, we don't make them for sale, although we probably will, but you've got to come on a trip. And we copped a little bit of flack early on from just people who didn't understand us or the mindset. I ran into another guy trekking Kokoda, and he said, mate, I love everything that you guys do. He owns another company. He said, but I can't take to the not dead yet thing, because we're dealing with a place where soldiers were killed, and that was his angle. And I think, well, I was a soldier. I've had mates that aren't around anymore, either in other countries or taking their lives post getting home, which is a problem in our community. And not dead yet is not meant to disrespect those people. Not dead yet is meant to honour those people. We do what we do because we're not dead yet. We're not going to say no to living our life because there are people that didn't get the opportunities we have. We've got people that die prematurely. We've got people that are born with disabilities. My son's, as an example, is autistic and intellectually impaired. So he's mentally between the age of 5 and 6, and yet he's 16 years of age. He won't have all the opportunities fully to do what my 3 daughters get to do, and so on. So if I take him to a school where there's 131 other kids every day, he's one of the better ones there. Some of them are fully disabled. They haven't done anything wrong. They were just born that way. That's just unfortunate for them. And I think it's almost disrespectful not to live my life fully when there are people like that would swap my absolute worst day for my absolute worst day for their best day at the drop of a hat, and would be more than happy to live that 24 hours. Well, not dead yet is about all of that. Why do you do what you do? Because we're not dead yet. Why say yes to things? Because we're not dead yet. I've had experiences where I had a guy booking on a certain trip for years, and all these things kept popping up. The GFC hit, I can't go. Going through a divorce with the wife, can't go. Always wanted to do this trip. And then when we finally got him booked on a trip, he gets diagnosed with a terminal cancer and can't go. And I think, man, it's the one trip he always wanted to do for 10, 15 years, and he never got to do it. And that kills me. It just kills me inside that he didn't say yes all those years ago and just make it work. And really, that's, I don't know, it's kind of a wordy answer of what not dead yet means to us.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a pretty powerful way to live, I reckon. So from what I can gather, you have a pretty special relationship with all of your 4 kids, which is obviously pretty cool. So as a father, what trait or mindset or skills have you tried to, 1, instill in them, and 2, that they've taught you?
Look, it's still, as a parent, like I didn't have great examples, obviously, to lead from, and so that's how we kind of teach things, right? We teach things through what we learn and what we know and what we experience. And some people replicate what they grew up with to the negative as well. And I didn't want to do that. And I don't drink or anything as a result, I think, of what my dad went through. And I had no problem with people drinking. I just know that it didn't seem to work out for my family when I was a kid, so I didn't want to do it. So I'm kind of learning on the fly like every other parent out there. And sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong. But probably the biggest things I try to teach the kids is I never ever say no to them when they say, I want to do this. And obviously, because Alyssa was 14 when she first told me she was going to climb Mount Everest. Now, I don't care if you want to be a doctor, a hairdresser, a carpenter, you want to climb a mountain, none of that matters to me. If you say it's what you want to do, I will never say no to you. But I also won't do any work for you. That's not my job. My job is to support you. I do believe you can have any dream you want if you've got the work ethic to back it up. My job is to support you when things go wrong, to pick you up when you fall down, to let you know that there's always a support net there. There's nothing that we can't talk about. But whatever it is that you want to achieve, whilst you have my full support, you have to do the work. And I think too often in life, in my experience anyway, our generation, as in my generation, is trying to clear the way for your generation. And we're doing you a disservice by doing that. We're constantly trying to make sure that our little Johnnies and little Sallys have got everything they needed and we clear the path for them. But sometimes they need some bumps and bruises, and sometimes they need to make a bad decision because that's the only way you learn to make good decisions. And sometimes they need to get it wrong in order to get it right. And, you know, if we take that ability to have that decision in their hands, even though we know it probably won't turn out right, if we take that off them, then over time they're not developing that muscle, that mental muscle. And therefore, one day when we're not around, or one day when the mistake is so big because they don't have the depth of knowledge and experience to make good decisions, well, my generation has to own that. We've created it. Rather than whinging about your generation, we need to say, well, we're fairly responsible for that situation. And it was because we wanted them to be happy all the time when they were young without making them realise that they build their own happiness. So those are kind of the traits I've tried to put in to my children and any kids I work with. I do a bit of work with a lot of different kids. You know, I've got a young girl training in a gym at the moment, Evie, with her dad, and she's 8 years old, and she's a great young kid, and she's been watching a list of stuff, and her dad, Rob, said, can I bring her in, and I'll look after her? I said, yeah, she's fine. I have a policy in my gym, 14 years and under, if you come in and train with your parents, you train for free. And so the parents are responsible for looking after them. I'm not a babysitter, and I don't overcoach them, but I encourage them to be there. So she starts coming in. 2 or 3 weeks ago, she's struggling at the gym, and she says to me, and I went over to her and I said to her, Evie, smile. And she said, why? And I said, because when you smile and when you lift your head up, you change your physiology. And when you change your physiology, you won't feel like you're going through pain. Because she was working really hard and she's only little. And so she's got to run twice as far as everyone else and all that sort of stuff. And she said, really? And I said, yeah. And her dad was there as well, Rob. And he said, yeah, like lift your head up. And anyway, like, you don't know if that stuff lands fully, but yesterday she was in the gym. I wasn't running her session. I came in after it. And I was sitting on the floor and she came over to me and she said, last week when I was here, I was talking to my auntie and my dad, and I told them to smile when they were struggling because it'll make you feel better. And I went, that's firm. Like, she's 8 years old, and
Yeah.
if you can walk your talk and live and breathe this stuff, you're giving them really good examples. But I wasn't saying, oh, are you okay? How do we make this easier for you? I was just giving her a little tip that says, hey, change your physiology and you'll change the way you feel about this situation. And she took it on board as an 8-year-old. So all kids, I try and have that same message for. What I've learned, I guess, in the reverse from my kids, and I've probably learned more from Christian than anyone else because of his disabilities, but, you know, you're not in control of everything that happens in life. And as parents, we don't own children. I used to get that question all the time, why would you allow Alyssa to climb Everest? And I said, well, I don't own her. She wants to put herself through something and she's committed to it. And she's willing to do all the work. Who am I to say no? Like, just because she's 16. One day she'll be 18 and I want her to still feel like I'm there. So I don't believe we own children. We're afforded a pretty good opportunity, a privilege to be able to have children and then impart some knowledge and guide them. That's all. That's all we do. And from there it becomes a partnership in my view. So I don't try and be best friends with the kids to the point where you're not leading. You have to give them some leadership. You also have to let them make decisions. But I've learned that as parents, we get it wrong, and it's okay to have some humility and be honest with the kids and go, yeah, I made a bad call there. And I definitely made some bad calls, particularly, post-divorce. There's no doubt about it. I made some really bad calls in those first couple of years. Because I was going through some stuff and I'm a human and I can study all this stuff, but I still make mistakes. And, all of my kids, my oldest daughter turns 25 this year in Brooklyn, and I can message any of my girls and say, just text them and say, hey, do you want to get a coffee? And nearly every time they'll say yes. I think that's a good relationship. That means that through some silly mistakes I did make in that period, there's still enough love and connection and understanding that I'm just human, that I don't feel judged by them. And I think that's a pretty cool space to be in. And I owe them the same in reverse as a parent to not judge them when they make mistakes, which they will and have and so on. So, I've just learned human connection, and it's something I didn't grow up fully with, but that I've now created in my own little circle, my own little community. And we're a really tight family, even though we're not, the mum and dad aren't together, we're still a really tight family unit. And I think that's because of all those lessons that we've learned together, and we've all learned that we're all human, we all make mistakes, and we've all still got each other's back no matter what.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So have you got any daily habits that you're aware of that help you to be the high performer that you are?
This is funny because I was driving this morning and I thought about us catching up, and I thought, you'll probably ask about habits. I don't know why I thought that. And I thought, what are my thoughts around habits? And the reason I think about this stuff is because you see people share, these are the habits that The Rock uses, and this is what Gary Vee does, and this is what Grant Cardone's doing. And I started to think, well, my habits are quite eclectic. Like, I've got my own, anyone that listens to my show knows I don't sleep a lot. I definitely need to sort that out, but it's something I'm constantly working on. I know that my workflow, where I get my best work done somewhere between 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning through to about 10. So I don't fight that. That's when I do it. But you naturally fall into a routine. We've all got a routine because that's the sort of animal that we are. And what I've learned is not to try and adopt other people's routines, but rather to look at myself holistically and say, and this is for anyone listening, how do you feel right now? Do you feel good about life? Are things going the direction that you want? And sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, right? But when they're not, then I'll go, okay, well, what can I change then? But when I'm feeling good and I'm achieving a lot of stuff and everything's going well, I don't mess with that. I don't go, well, damn, I better change my routine. So I better, I did Marcus Aubrey's Own the Day, where he has that whole morning routine of movement, of meditation, of lemon and pink salt water.
Very
all of
similar
that stuff,
to Robin Sharma's one.
Yeah, hot and cold shower, the whole. So I did all of that, and I've used that at times to reset myself. But it's not necessarily that I do that all the time. I like that stuff, and even Robin Sharma stuff. I like that as a reset, as opposed to, because I think if I keep doing that daily, then I'm going to lose the point of it, which is some discomfort, some snapping you out of some things, some mindfulness. So for me, and I'm not recommending this routine for anyone, but I get up when I wake up. I next to never set an alarm. I set an alarm, but I next to never have it go off. So I'll normally be at the gym by 4:30 in the morning because the first session's at 5:15.
Yeah.
But I'll be up somewhere between 1:30 and 2 like clockwork. I'll just wake up. I'll get up. I'll have a shower. I'll get all my stuff together, and I'll head into a 24-hour cafe often. Sometimes to work, but often to a cafe. I might buy one coffee at that time of the morning. But then mostly I just sit there and work on my computer. I'll write notes for the pod. So Sundays, for example, I write notes for the podcast for the week ahead because I record it weekly. All right, what are the things that are standing out to me for this week? What do I want to talk about? And then I'll go and do my bushwalk on Sunday, and I've already got that planned. But for the rest of the week, I plan. I've got a couple of live coaching groups. I'll plan for those. I'll plan for the gym. So what the team are doing, I've just hired some more staff members, and you need to give them guidance. And so day to day changes a little bit, but generally there's a 2-hour period between 2 and 4 or 2:30 and 4:30 where I'm uninterrupted. There's no phone calls, there's no emails, there's no anything. There's just me planning my day, my week, anything that I feel needs to be handled. And then I'll do that. Then I'll go in and I'll run a few sessions. I'll train myself, and then I'll jump on emails. I always try and take my daughter to school. My youngest daughter's the only one left at school now. I'll take her to school when I can, and pick her up when I can. I have team meetings on a Monday at 10:30 just to go through everything with my team. I catch up with them all individually, but we do one together. I instill this stuff in my team, so everyone has to come forward with what's one thing they've worked on in the last week for personal development, a podcast they've listened to, a book they've read, or a chapter of a book. But they can't just tell me that that's what they've done. They have to tell me what did they actually get out of it that's useful to them or they think would be useful to someone else. And, there's Alyssa and I in that group, and we participate. And all the trainers have found that really beneficial because they're going, it's kind of challenging because you guys are doing a lot of this stuff and we can't just sort of half-ass this. We've got to do it properly. And it's been really, really good. And one of our young guys, Zaya, read a personal development book for the first time as a result, which was Atomic Habits, a great one to start with.
Right.
And it just absolutely blew his head back. He's 23 years old and he's reading something like Atomic Habits for the first time. And he's like, holy crap, like it opened up a whole new world for him. And he's 23 years old. That's pretty cool. So I have that system on a Monday. Most of my work for the week is done Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then the second half of the week, and the second half of every day, I like to have open to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
So that's the workflow I get to work to. I get to know by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there's nothing I have to do. And by Thursday, Friday, there's nothing I have to do. Now I fill in with catch-ups, meetings. I like people, so I coach a lot on those days and just spend a lot of time around people, to be honest.
Yeah. Awesome. So before I ask my final 3 questions, where can people find your content?
Pretty much everywhere, I guess, that you find all content these days. But I have my own personal Instagram, which is just Glenn Azar. I made that private recently, mainly because I kept having some issues where people were like catfishing your page and stealing photos, including photos of my kids. And then it's like bizarre because I'm not famous. And then people would point it out to me and we'd have to go and get it shut down. But that's where I do all my motivational stuff, and it shares automatically across to a Facebook page called the Building Better Humans Project. And then Adventure Professionals for all of our adventure stuff. It's both on Instagram and Facebook. And then Project 180, which is just in Brisbane at the moment. But we've got a lot of people that follow that page just for general interest of motivation, inspiration, content, fitness. It's a no BS. I don't just write catchy quotes. I try and put on all of my stuff, I try and put, why do I think that quote means something, or what does it mean to me, rather than just share a quote. I like to just go a little bit deeper on stuff. So those are pretty easiest ways. And anyone can connect with me on Facebook. Just Glenn Azar, Glenn with 2 N's, AZAR. I'm pretty easy to track down. There's not too many with that name floating around, I guess.
Oh, perfect. I'll chuck
all the
links in.
websites. Yeah, and there's all the websites too, 180.net.au, adventureprofessionals.com.au, and glenazar.com.
Awesome. So we'll head into the final 3 questions now. So the first one is basically the thing I like to live by, and the thing that kind of defines SOTA is define your greatness. So for you, Glenn, how would you define greatness?
So this is very individual. I'm not going to suggest this for everyone, but for me, and this changes through life, right? But for me at 47, greatness now is about how many people can I take along a journey with me? How many people can I make feel better about themselves because of an interaction with me? So, now, and we don't always get this right. So for me, defining greatness is when someone messages me and says something you said changed, or something you did change, or something you posted changed the way I think, feel, or act about myself. I feel like that's greatness. Whereas when I was in the army, greatness was about me. What am I achieving? What am I doing? I want to be the fittest, the fastest, the strongest. And if you and I come up against each other, I want to pound you into the ground because I've got to win this thing in every format. Well, I'm kind of past that now. And greatness now is about who can I take on the journey with me? What do the people around me feel like when they're around me, and what are they getting out of it? And if that's a positive, to me, that's greatness.
Yeah, I love that answer. That's awesome. So the second last one, if you had to leave someone with your top 3 pieces of advice, or the 3 things you know to be true, what would these be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know. Like top 3 things to be true. I'm just thinking totally off the fly here, but the power of positive thinking, it can never be underestimated. I just know that to be true. And if you ever want to test that, just try being positive in every interaction you have with someone for the next 30 days or even for the next week. The person who serves you coffee, every person you interact with, try and interact with it on a positive. So I'll do that where someone will say, I'll go to a coffee shop, and I'll say, how's your weekend? And everyone goes, not long enough or too short or, yeah, it was okay. I try and be more in-depth my answer. People go, what did you do on the weekend? Or how was your weekend? I'll go, really productive. And they go, and they look up because they normally just looking down at their coffee. Oh, productive. Because they're not used to that answer. So now I feel like we're having a positive interaction. Oh, productive. What'd you do? And I just rattle off some things that I did. And it might not have even been that productive, but it's more just creating that conversation. So number one for me is positive thinking. Just give it a go. If what you're currently doing is not working, be willing to try something else. And I dare say if someone's listening to the SOTA process, well, they're already thinking that way,
Yeah.
but try it on other people. Number two is to be conscious of how it feels to interact with you. And this is not my concept. It's a concept of Craig Harper's that I absolutely love. What's the experience of me? If all of us thought about what is the experience of Glenn Azar or Tom Evans, or when I deal with someone, because we might think we're all that and a bag of chips, but what does everyone else think? No matter what our intentions are, when people walk away from us, do they feel better? Because if they don't, and particularly if we're in the personal development field, what are we doing? I had a really, really good friend and client recently who was training with another personal trainer before we opened our gym. And when he found out she was coming to train with us and still training with him, he started treating her really poorly and started to withdraw some attention from her. She's still paying and she's still attending his sessions, but started making her feel really bad about herself. And I said, well, if that's the experience of him and he's in the personal development field, he needs to have a long, hard look, because people shouldn't feel like that when they walk away from you. So positive thinking, what is the experience of me? And the other one, if I was to give a third tip, would be don't be locked into anything to the point where you're not flexible in your opinion on it. So if you absolutely know everything, these are what I know to be true, and no one can convince me otherwise, you're missing out on so many experiences in life. You try and interact with people you don't agree with all the time, but find people that are cool with that and willing to have discussions/debates. No aggression, no social media slandering and carry on that people do, but just to go, wow, this is how I do that. When people have a totally different opinion to me, which I love being in those discussions, I'll think to myself, that's really interesting. I wonder why they think like that. And I'll sometimes ask people, even if they're really aggressive, I'll go, well, I don't feel the same, but it really interests me as to why you feel that way, and I'd love to explore it more. And people kind of soften and go, oh, okay, so you actually want to hear why I think that? Most of the time it's trained from our upbringing or other people. But if you just walk around life rock solid that this is absolutely true and no one can convince me otherwise, then your life has kind of stopped growing. And I think that's not natural for us as an animal. And that's where you find people arguing about politics and climate change, and to the point where they think they're so right that the only way for me to prove that is for you to be wrong. And I just think that's a really bizarre. And when I say I think it's really bizarre, I've been there. I've 100% been there. These are revelations in the last 2 to 5 years, believe it or not. But now I look back at that old self and think, God, this crap you used to defend, and think you had to be right, you had to win, and maybe you weren't right. Maybe you just had different life experiences. So be a bit more flexible in your approach would be my third one.
Yeah. Oh, that's a pretty epic answer. So,
I'm very wordy, I know, mate. Sorry.
No, that was awesome. Lastly, I reached out to have you on the podcast because at the end of the day, I believe you are someone who strives to live a life that is state of the art. So, in your opinion, what makes you state of the art, and why is that being important?
It's a hard one because, it's state of the art. I guess it probably means something different for everyone else, but it sounds, I don't know that I am, but I'll thank you for that. And I'll say that if I'm different to other people, I've got an incredible amount of resilience. I believe in myself no matter what. And I believe, as long as I believe in my heart that I'm coming with the right intentions and that I'm doing my best, then I don't beat myself up for the mistakes I've made. And I've made plenty of them, like we all do. But I'm not looking at what did I do 5 years ago where I made some epic mistakes, and 10 years ago, because I know I can't change that now. So I think where I've been really good is I don't just continually beat myself up and I just go, okay, well, you got it wrong. I'm really, really good at self-assessment. You got that wrong. Well, why? That's not really the outcome you wanted. Why did that happen? What could I do differently? And so I'm really good at self-assessing without bashing myself. And then the other thing I'm really good at is just taking action. I'm an action-taking machine. If I say something's going to happen, my team often hate it when I come back from an adventure / like it, but they say you come back with so many ideas and concepts because you've been out in the jungle for 10 days and when you say it's going to happen, it literally happens. If I say something's going to happen, sometimes 2 weeks later, I was just wanting to reconfigure my office. And one of the guys come in and said, and there's a wall in my office on Friday. And he said, 2 days ago, there was no wall here. And you said there was going to be a wall, and 2 days later, there's a wall. I said, yeah, I rang one of the builders I know, he's a good mate of mine. And next thing you know, and I do some coaching with their staff, and next thing you know, 2 days later, we've got a wall. So I like to take action on stuff. It's not that I don't think it through, but once I've got an idea and I feel like that's the right move, I don't overanalyze it. I don't do analysis by paralysis and go, but what if? What if that doesn't happen? And what if this doesn't happen? And people start to analyze something to the point where they talk themselves out of taking any action. And then in 5 and 10 years' time, it becomes, what if I had have done that thing? Or whereas I prefer just to take an action, get a result, and then adjust the action if the result's not what I wanted. So action taking it really is something that separates me from a lot of people I've dealt with. Is they just do not take action on some of the most epic ideas that I've dealt with good friends of mine, and they don't take action on them, and it kills me.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, Glenn, thank you very much for that. That was awesome.
Thanks, mate. Hope you got some value out of it. And mate, as you and I know, like we've crossed paths a bit through the podcast over the last couple of years, and it's been an absolute honour to watch you slowly building out what you're building. And mate, you are a baby, and I say that with no disrespect because I started getting into even reading my first book around personal development really at 29, 30 years of age. So to see, young Australians like yourself coming through, I think it's crazy and awesome. So good on you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. That was a pretty awesome episode. Guys, what an episode. I don't know about you, but I think that is hands down by far my favourite episode of the SOTA process yet. I already knew Glenn was an incredible and inspirational human being, yet he still managed to blow me away yet again. And just the way he articulates everything is amazing. I mean, he's just so open to telling his story, and I love that, which I think for a lot of you, either now or in the near future, his story is pretty relatable to you. And I think a lot of you have probably either had or are going to have similar situations to Glenn. But he's just chosen to take a different route. He's chosen to take his own path, do his own thing, and figure things out for himself instead of going with the cliche or that sort of thing. And he's just proof that regardless of your age, you can turn it around and you can become the best version of you and essentially become state of the art. And one of the real eye-openers for me in this podcast was when Glenn spoke about moving out of home so young. He could have easily experimented with the drugs that he was taking at the time and the environment and a whole lot more than what he did. However, he made a choice to get out of it. And I think that's very, very powerful. That's the most powerful thing there. This is something I firmly believe in as well. Everything you do is a choice. And like Tom Bilyeu says, treat everything like it's your own fault, because to an extent it is. And then that will give you the power to make the decision to get yourself out of a situation that may or may not actually be your fault. And something else I found to be seriously inspiring was Glenn's definition of greatness. He acknowledged that sort of at a younger age, his definition of greatness would have been quite different. But now that he's wiser and has gained more experience, he said his definition of greatness is basically how many people he can take along on the ride with him. And for me, this was quite profound and really sums up who Glenn is as a person and what his businesses are all about as well. It's about getting people from where they are to where they want to be by taking them along the ride with him, which I think is pretty cool. And that aligns with something Will Smith once said actually, which was, if you're not helping anybody, then you're wasting your time. So clearly, Glenn finds great value, happiness and fulfillment in serving others, which is something I would recommend for you all to do. And again, like Will Smith said, your life will become better by making other people's lives better. And Glenn's 3 biggest pieces of advice or truth is something else I found to be quite moving in this podcast as well. His first one was never underestimate the power of positive thinking. And this is something that a lot of people aren't great at, so it's a pretty underrated skill in my opinion, despite how cliche it is. And even for me, I know that it's something I've struggled with and continue to struggle with to this day, and it's something I need to get better at. and I need to work on a consistent basis. So if this is you too, like Glenn said, try going 30 days in a row, being as positive as you can in every interaction you have. Then what you need to do after those 30 days is reassess and keep going as well. Get to 60, get to 66, I think is supposed to be the magic number, because that's when habits actually begin to form. That's the science behind it. They've proven after, I'm pretty sure it's 66 days, is that habits are usually set and formed by then. And this is something that you definitely want to make a habit, trust me. And his second one was be conscious of how you interact with others. So basically, think about how you leave people. Be conscious of the mark or impression you leave on people. And like Jim Carrey said, the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. And the third thing that Glenn knows to be true is to not lock your mindset in. Don't have a fixed mindset. Be open. If you think you know something and someone comes in with different facts or a different opinion, listen to it. Don't reject it. Because as Glenn said, you will miss out on the experiences and opportunities if you do that. Consider their point of view, then reevaluate your previous idea, because you may actually be wrong. And if that's the case, there's no point not accepting that. Basically just be more open to learning, because things do change and you need to be open to that. Alright, Sotarians, that wraps up this episode with the legend himself, Glenn Azar. I'm literally so hyped right now. That chat was honestly amazing. I learnt so much myself and I hope you guys have as well. So if you haven't already, head down to the show notes, find the links for all Glenn's stuff and check it out. My mum and I are actually planning to do a Kokoda trip with Glenn pretty soon, so that should be a life-changing experience and I've heard great things about it. So if you're interested in doing the Kokoda Trail, definitely hit Glenn up because he has some pretty cool packages for that as well. And also, some of you may know of Glenn's daughter, Alyssa. She's the youngest Australian to summit Mount Everest, and she's done it from the north and south faces too. And she's got a pretty inspirational story, so I'll definitely be keen to get her on the podcast at some point, because I reckon she'd, like Glenn, have a lot of interesting things to say. Also, legends, if you took some value from this episode, please take a screenshot, post it on your Instagram story. Don't forget to tag the SOTA process, tag SOTAfit, and tag Glenn as well, so we all know that you're listening. Alright, Sotarians, you know what to do. It's time to get out there, define your greatness, and be state of the art. Hey Sotarians, thank you so much for listening to that episode, and I hope you've been able to take some great value from it. Now, I just want to ask one small favour from you. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, please head over and give the podcast a review. This helps us to see your thoughts and get some feedback on how we can develop and improve the show. Also, could you please share this episode with someone you think needs to hear the message of this podcast? This helps us to spread the word and the processes on how we can all become state of the art. Alternatively, you could screenshot this episode and post it on your Instagram story. Don't forget to tag the SOTA process and SOTAfit so we can get some instant feedback. Thank you guys, I love you all, now let's get it.